Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Education USA India's undergraduate application camp, a 7-part webinar series. It's a complete guide to applying to bachelor's degree program at US universities. Before we begin the today's session, there are a few housekeeping rules. I'm sure it's visible to all of you on the screen. It would be great if you can introduce yourself by typing in your name, are you a student or a parent, and where are you from? So this will help us to connect with you better. Also for enhanced audio quality, use your headphones. Please mute your microphones, and if you have any questions, you can type it in the chat box or the questions box. And we have also uploaded our Education USA India Center's contact sheet. Please feel free to download them at any part of this presentation. Today's session is on unlocking the financial puzzle, scholarships versus financial aid. We all know that in your pursuit of finding a best fit institution, affordability is one of the most important factors for many students. And scholarships and financial aid are always the two magical words, which are either interchangeably used. But whatever be the case, every student is always attentive when there is an information about scholarship or financial aid. So in today's session, we will try and unlock what is this puzzle is all about and how do I differentiate between one or the other. So how institutions offer such scholarships or financial aid or any sort of a support in paying for their education. And we also have very renowned panelists with us, and I'm sure some of them would be very familiar to you. Once I finish the introduction to Education USA, I would be individually introducing the panelists to you as well. Okay. I know many of you are following us very closely and you're being part of most of our presentations. However, every session we find more newer students joining us. So for the benefit of everyone, I'm just going to go over briefly the introduction to Education USA. Education USA is supported by the US State Department, and our mandate is to offer accurate, comprehensive, current information on US higher education. In our mission, we have 430 plus centers spread over 170 plus countries. And in India alone, we have 7 centers located at Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Kolkata, and Mumbai and New Delhi. We advocate 5 steps to US study. So the 5 steps clearly explains to you a process which students like you would definitely go through when you intend pursuing your higher education in the US. So the research your option, which is the first step, helps you to identify institution that best fit your requirement, followed by the step 2, which is helping you to assess your affordability to pursue your higher education in those institutions. So how do I assess my affordability? Obviously, it's just not a single person's activity. The entire family is involved in understanding how they are going to fund your higher education and what are the ways in which they can get a support from the university. So when we talk about the support from the university, every US university do offer scholarships or financial aid to students depending on certain regulations or policy that they have in place. So apart from a need, the academic performance of a student and maybe several other factors would contribute to getting such scholarships. So while planning for your education, scholarship is an X factor. So you cannot always count it into the net education expenses. Keep that in bay, but make sure that you have a better plan to go for that education. So today's session will deal more with explaining you how you go about this, and also it will touch base on some of those applications you would forward towards, informing the institution what is your financial status. So it will also have some overlapping information on the step 3. So Any Education USA center can provide detailed information on these 5 steps. And added to that, we also have a daily session on explaining to you how this 5 steps work. Okay. So here, there are a few information about how do you connect with Education USA. We all know that these days the information is on our fingertips. So please feel free to download our mobile app, which gives you a clear roadmap to how you can accomplish those 5 steps, plus also alerts about various sessions that happen. You can also see the social media handles that we have posted here. I'm sure most of you are connected with us either through Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube and Instagram. And to add to this, our today's session is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel. And I also welcome or extend my welcome to all those who are joining us through those social media platforms as well. Here is a quick note on the various services we offer to students like you. To get a better understanding of the process and also to get notifications about the sessions we do, we encourage you to sign up for our updates using the link provided here. And you can also download our calendar of events, which will give you the various sessions that we do over a week or sometimes over a fortnight as well. There is a national toll-free line number which is available from Monday to Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Please feel free to connect with us through that as well. And all our virtual sessions are free for everyone. And as I told you in the beginning, you can attend any one day basic orientation on 5 steps to your study and understand what we explain through this process. The links for joining us in these sessions are also given here. But for Saturday, Monday to Friday, you will be going through a EducationUSA virtual session link, and on Saturdays, EducationUSA BO. And apart from this, camps like this, webinar series like this, and individual specialized information sessions with US university representatives also include in our calendar. Another important service that we offer to students is individual advising memberships for a very nominal fee. We recommend you to connect with your nearest center and get from them the details about how to sign up for such memberships. So in today's undergrad application camp series, we are going to talk about unlocking the financial puzzle with Education USA Chennai. So I'm Shanti Mohan. I'm from the Education USA Center at Chennai. I'm joined by my colleague Aparna Chandrasekharan, who's also an Education USA advisor. Both of us are here today to help you answering your queries, along with my wonderful panelist, whom I'm going to introduce in a short while from now. Okay, over to just giving you a very, very brief introduction to our panelists, because I would leave that opportunity to them, and they can probably talk a little more about them when they start their presentation. We have with us today Ms. Lisa Shen, Assistant Dean of Admissions at Swarthmore College. And you all know Swarthmore is a liberal arts and science college. Ms. Amber Longton, she's the Senior International Admissions Counselor at Michigan State University. Mr. Mark Vallon, Associate Director for International Admissions at Drexel University. They are really wonderful panelists, and without grabbing their time, I would now hand over the stage to Lisa, who will start her presentation on Swarthmore College and what do they have to offer to the students. So Lisa, I'm here to help you with navigating the slide. So please feel free to tell me when you want to go to the next slide. Thank you.
Thanks, Shanti. So as Shanti said, my name is Lisa Shen. I am an assistant dean at Swarthmore College. So here is a picture of our campus, and there's also a picture of our campus behind me. Shanti, do you want to go next? So Swarthmore is a private liberal arts college that offers liberal arts, sciences, and engineering coursework, which is pretty unique with liberal arts schools. Most liberal arts colleges in the US do not also have engineering, but Swarthmore has had an engineering program housed in-house for the last few hundred years. And we are undergraduate only. So that means all of the faculty attention and all of the coursework is just for undergraduate students. So we are about 1,600 students. So we are a small school, and we are about 14% international. So that also includes international citizens as well as DACA and undocumented students in the US. Shanti, can you go to the previous slide? Great, thank you. And with our international students, we represent over 75 different countries. So for a small school, we have a pretty diverse representation on campus. We have over 40 programs of study that are all interdisciplinary in nature. So what that means is that even if you are an engineering student, you are still taking coursework in the humanities and in the social sciences. So you could be taking a philosophy class and a gender and sexual studies class, as well as your engineering courses. And we also have the option for students to design their own major. So if we don't have a major that works for you or is not something that you're looking for, we have options for students to bring in coursework from different majors that we already offer to create your own major. And we call these special majors. So this is a pretty special opportunity for students to really take control of their education and really determine what it is that they want to study. We are located about 18 kilometers outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is the 6th largest city in the US. And our campus itself is an arboretum, which is just a fancy way to say a tree museum. So you can see from these photos that we have a lot of greenery and foliage, and every single plant on our campus is labeled with its scientific name and its commonly used name. So when you walk around campus, we are seeing students continue to learn even though they're outside of their classroom, because they're reading these signs and learning a little bit more about all the plant life in our campus, which is pretty special. Next slide, please. So Swarthmore was founded by Quakers back in the 1800s. And Quakers are really based in social justice. So the Quaker ideology that founded Swarthmore is that everybody has an inner light within themselves. Nobody's light is greater or less than anyone else's light. And that has really carried through until now, even though we are no longer Quaker affiliated. So we are really committed to access, equity, inclusion, and affordability. We have lots of programs and lots of policies in place to really encourage students to think about their education and to think about the world through a social justice lens. So one way that we do that is by having our pass-fail first semester. So all of our students, when they first arrive to Swarthmore for their first semester, or all of our first year students, their first semester is pass or fail. So if you get a low grade, but it's still a pass, you pass the class, and that's what it looks like on your transcript. And nobody knows the difference except for you and your faculty member. So that's our way to really help students transition into being a college student, as well as to help students start thinking about their courses as collaborative and not competitive, to really start thinking about what it is that they're learning rather than what grade they have to get to move on to the next level. And we also do that through our no GPA system. So we do not record a grade point average for any of our students. We do not graduate any of our students with a GPA. And that is our way to make sure that students aren't so focused on a merit marker and to be really focused on the content that they're learning in the classroom as well as outside of the classroom. So we really think that these, as well as other policies, are really pushing our students to be more collaborative rather than competitive within each other, with each other, and to really work together to do things for the good of the world and the good of justice. And then we are also part of a tri-college consortium with other Quaker-founded institutions in the area. So the other two schools are Haverford and Bryn Mawr College. So all three schools share this similar founding, and we share academics as well as social life. So even though we are a smaller school, our social net and our academic net is much larger than just Swarthmore itself. So students are able to take classes or go to the dining halls at Haverford or Bryn Mawr so they can meet and commune with many other people. And the Lang Center for Civic and Social Responsibility is our cornerstone office to really help students pursue social justice work through volunteering, through entrepreneurship, or any other activities outside of the classroom that really help them push themselves towards work that really addresses the issues that are happening around the world these days. And then for our commitment to access, we operate a cash-free campus. So what that means is that once a student is on campus, we do not want them to pay extra for anything that is related to their studies at Swarthmore or related to their social activities that are organized through Swarthmore. So this could be as small as printing a paper or doing your laundry. Yes, everybody will have to do their own laundry once they get on campus. But it could be as big as attending a basketball tournament or going to a special speaker series. So for some of these events, they are paid, but Swarthmore, the college, will pay for our students to attend these events because we want you to have access to any sort of activity that will support you in your studies at SWAT. So we want this to be an opportunity for you to take advantage of everything that we have to offer without worrying about the cost of it. And then we also have research. So like I said earlier, we are undergraduate only. So all of our research opportunities are dedicated to undergraduate students. So if you are researching with a faculty member at Swarthmore, you are not fetching their coffee, you are actually in the lab or in the field really doing research with them and alongside them and potentially being published with them if you are a huge part of their research project. And we fund about $800,000 US a year in research and social justice projects. Next slide, please. So a couple of notes for international applicants. So if you are an international citizen, so our test optional policy does extend to international students. And what that means is that you do not need to submit a test score, so an SAT or an ACT score, to be considered for admission to Swarthmore or be considered for financial aid. And a question that I get a lot that I wanted to address now is, does that mean that if I don't submit a test score, my application will be seen negatively? No, we really believe in test optional for the next 2 years and potentially for longer. We do think, and we do review applications without your test score the same way that we would if a student has a test score. So it does not negatively impact your application, and it definitely does not negatively impact your financial aid award. So for students who go to schools that are not primarily taught in English, we do recommend having a TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo score, but it is not required. So if you are unable to take those tests, it's okay. We don't require them. But if you were able to take the test in the past, or you took some form of online version, you can submit those scores. And if you are submitting any TOEFL, IELTS, ACT, or SAT scores, we accept self-reported scores, so you do not need to submit the official score during the application process. And then for interviews for international citizens, they are optional, and we do allow initial view, Vericant, or Duolingo interviews, and we do have fee waivers available. So if you would like a fee waiver for one of those options, please contact me. Next slide, please. And then I'll leave this presentation for my part on our financial aid. So we meet 100% of determined need with loan-free financial aid awards at Swarthmore. So our financial aid is almost entirely based on what you need to be able to attend college at Swarthmore. It is not based on merit. So that's partially why your SAT or ACT score has no bearing on financial aid. It's because our financial aid is based on financial need. And our financial aid is comprised of grants and work aid. So grants are loan free, so we don't expect you to pay them back. And then the work aid is when you find a job on campus, your payment or your salary for that job will be a part of your financial aid award. And our financial aid is determined using the CSS profile and the ISFA. And so those are things that you'll have to submit when you are applying for college to Swarthmore. And we are need blind for US citizens and permanent residents, but need aware for international citizens during the application process. So if you think that you're going to need financial aid at any time during your 4 years at Swarthmore, we do ask that you apply for financial aid at the time of application, because you will not be able to do that afterwards. And then next slide, please. So if you want to keep in touch with us, here are different ways, and you can snap that QR code if you want to join our mailing list. But otherwise, I will pass it on to my colleague, Mark.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning to my colleagues, Lisa, Amber. Thank you for your time and joining today. Good evening to all of you attending. My name is Mark Vallone. I am the Associate Director for International Admissions at Drexel University. I've been working with international students for the better part of about a decade, and I have been overcome with challenges over the last several years in this field. Challenges that I'm happy to say that Drexel has taken in stride. Shanti, could you move to the next slide, please? We are a comprehensive research institute, a tier 1 Carnegie classified research university, meaning the highest level of research activity. I believe it's 27 schools. I could be incorrect in that. However, if you're keeping track at home, most of these numbers you see on the screen are things that you've probably seen at every other college presentation. 15,000 total undergraduate students at Drexel. I will say that this is a bit of a red herring, maybe. You see our student to faculty ratio is 11:1, median class size of 19 students. Those are very attractive numbers for a school with 15,000 undergraduate students. How do we do it? We do it through our co-op program. Cooperative education is the cornerstone, the backbone of a Drexel experience. And we're taking, of those 15,000 undergraduate students, we're removing them from the traditional classroom of 4 walls and putting them into co-op. Co-op is either 6 months or 18 months of professional work experience. We'll talk a little bit about that a little further on. But you see that we are a international community, 126 different countries represented at any time on campus. We are in the city of Philadelphia, about 18 kilometers from Swarthmore, and we love to have the city as to our advantage, use it to our advantage, not just through the co-op program, but also access throughout the country, throughout the globe, for you students, for your co-op as well. Shanti, next slide. Thank you so much. We do have 80 undergraduate majors of study. Those are listed in the colleges and schools on the right-hand side of the slide you see. And if one of those majors does not fit your needs, we do offer the custom design major. When I was actually starting at Drexel, I learned that has nothing to do with interior or exterior design, but rather you designing your course of study. So we had a student a couple years ago graduated, and this student was interested in fashion and sustainability. So they were working with the faculty before they started. They applied through the custom design program. You present your proposed coursework over the 4 or 5 years to the faculty board. They approve, or if they do not approve, you work with them to eventually get it approved, and you're able to really carve out a individual education that you would like to see that Drexel does not necessarily offer in one little package of an undergraduate study. You'll see also this slide shows the world-class academics feeding real-world experience. We were founded in 1891 by Anthony J. Drexel. Anthony J. Drexel, A.J. Drexel, his most probably his most famous quote that we say is that, "I know the world is going to change, and therefore the university must change with it." To that end, during this pandemic, Drexel was able to have a smooth transition to online study. We've been doing online coursework since the 1990s. So our university was well equipped and well prepared to handle this transition. But also beyond COVID, our university has needed to keep up to date and up to speed with the world that's ever changing. We want to be preparing students for jobs that might not exist yet. And to that end, we, for the last 130 years, we have been using co-op to help students in the professional world understand, get their feet wet, so to speak, and then dive in post-graduation. Shanti, could you move to the next slide, please? Now, I mentioned co-op, and this is how we do what we do. This is the way we do what we do. A lot of many institutions, I'm going on a limb here and saying an overwhelming majority of institutions utilize a semester system. 2 semesters with a period in between for accelerated study, maybe doing 6 weeks of classes during a winter break, what have you. Drexel utilizes a quarter system. We align it with the traditional 4 seasons that we experience here in the Western Hemisphere and north of the equator. So you'll see in looking at these 2 slides side by side, we do offer the 4-year curriculum and a 5-year curriculum. The blue squares with the white circles are periods of traditional study in 4-walled classrooms. So there are 12 academic terms where you will be a student. And then there are either 2 terms or, 6 terms where you will be doing co-op. Co-op is, it is not an internship. Cooperative experience is entry-level work. About 85% of our co-ops are paid. So in terms of financial aid, we also look at generated income as a way to support you during your studies. And our students are going into the workforce and earning an entry-level salary. So for those 6 months, students are earning income, hopefully saving some of that money, and putting it towards good use in the future. We do have students who, if they are pursuing the 5-year 3 co-op curriculum, they do international co-op. Many of our international students choose to go home. They want to live with their folks, save a little bit of pocket money, and eventually make a contribution in their local community. So if you're coming from Chennai, you're more than welcome to seek a co-op experience in Chennai, and you're able to save a little bit on room and board costs there. You are not paying tuition while you're on co-op. So keep in mind that, again, those 12 academic terms are what you would be responsible for in terms of tuition. And finally, I will say that the international co-op experience is not uncommon. We offer co-op internationally in over 40 different countries. If you're not willing or not able to do co-op internationally, we do have smaller options. I recognize I'm speaking to what we would consider international students studying in the United States. So you're already studying abroad perchance, but if you have an interest in going to Tokyo, in going to London and doing international business, you can do your co-op in those places. Shanti, thank you for the next slide. Here are some examples of what our students are doing on co-op. And I will say, many students ask me, Mr. Vallone, is it best to do the 4-year 1 co-op experience or 5-year 3 co-op experience? I'm not going to tell you what is best for you. If you have specific plans, if you have a target graduation date over 4 years. I'm not going to impose my opinion on this. I will say that the 5-year 3 co-op experience allows students 3 times as much as professional experience as they would get in the 4-year co-op plan, and that does nothing but expand your network. You see in these days, jobs are acquired through your network, through what not necessarily what you know, but who you know. So having those expanded networks is critical. Also, our students and our employers are happy through co-op. 93% of our co-op employers said not only would they hire a student back for a second co-op experience, but they would hire them full-time as well, which is incredibly telling of just the kind of student that we have at Drexel, but also that the work that our students are capable of doing. Shanti, next slide, please. We are in the city of Philadelphia, as I mentioned. Of course, we have student organizations. This would be on your college search bingo card, perchance, or of course, many of us will say if we don't have an organization that fits your needs, you can create one. That is abundantly true at Drexel as well. And it's not all work. You saw the slide with the co-ops, and there are 4 terms, and in between each of those terms, there are about 2 weeks of time. So with 1 dedicated term for summer break, you do get 2 weeks in between terms to rest, recharge, but it's also, we also want you to be a student. We want you to have fun. We realize too that our best students are not just studying in the classroom, studying in the field, going home to their dorm room and studying some more. Really, the students we find most attractive are the ones that are contributing to the community. We do strive to be the most civically engaged university in the country. We do that through the Lindley Center, through Dornsife, through public health. So we do have a very hyper-involved community in West Philadelphia. West Philadelphia also houses the University of Pennsylvania and the University of the Sciences. Shanti, I'm sorry, could you go to the next slide, please? And between these 3 schools, we comprise what we call University City. But in the city of Philadelphia, you also have 250,000 students at college age. So the 2 largest employing industries in Philadelphia, I like to say, are meds and eds, hospitals and universities. And because of that, there is a booming youth in Philadelphia that is very present. Like I said, 250,000 college age students. We do look at financing the Drexel experience as a partnership. You'll see here, this is, I do take umbrage to this slide. As partners include the federal government, Drexel University, and students and families. I would switch out the federal government here for our purposes. I'd like to say third-party stakeholders, because there are ways to obtain scholarships outside of the federal government. Also, many of our students coming from abroad do not qualify for FAFSA. The FAFSA is for U.S. citizens. Now, if you happen to be a dual citizen or a U.S. citizen living abroad, of course, that is available to you. But for our purposes, really, third-party stakeholders, I think, is a little bit more appropriate. Shanti, next slide, please. Important deadlines. It's hard to believe that early decision and early action application deadlines is coming up. I know, Amber, I see you shaking your head. I did wide-eyed. I can't believe it either. But leading up to the November 1st deadline, please know that we are hyper accessible. If you're choosing to do early decision, that is binding. Early action is non-binding. I have a feeling that you've had many presentations that have said this, so we're not going to focus so much time on that. And Shanti, just one more advance, and I think that should be it for me. But during this time, we are charged to be not just counselors and advisors, but to help you. And we realize that our roles are critically important these days. So please feel free to use us as resources. I know I get a lot of emails, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues here, but a lot of emails that say, I am sorry to bother you. If you did not bother me, I would not have a job, and you are not a bother. So our charge is to help you We are called during this time to serve you and assist you through the application process. My email, I believe, should be on the next slide. I'm not sure if there was a secret slide. That's nice. Okay, great. General inquiries you'll see on the left-hand side. That will get you, you can ask any question of enroll at drexel.edu. My personal email is also listed up there. So feel free to reach out to me directly. And now I'm going to pass it over to Amber. Amber, are you in Central Time Zone? Do you get to wake up an hour earlier than all of us?
No, I'm on Eastern time, my friends.
That's great, great.
I'm at the very tail end of the time zone, so I get the best of both worlds. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Mark. Lisa, it was actually really interesting to listen to your presentation too. I'm so glad that I could join you guys today. My name is Amber and I'm from Michigan State University. While my colleagues are here today representing more of a private school background, I'm here as a public institution in the United States. And the difference is really a lot about funding. And so I'm primarily funded through our students and also through the state government. And so we get funding through there as well. We are a big university at Michigan State University. We've got just under 50,000 students, and around 40,000 of those are going to be undergraduate students. And so our real focus here is to try and make sure we're giving you the best undergraduate experience possible for the 4 years that you'll be joining us here in East Lansing. We have about 200 different majors and areas of study on campus, which means pretty much anything with the exception of architecture, you can study here at Michigan State. That includes a lot of really great programs that you might have heard of before and highly ranked things like supply chain management and hospitality business, which are top 5 programs. We've got a really popular College of Engineering. Tons of my students are interested in computer science and mechanical engineering. Mechanical engineering makes sense. I'm in Michigan, home of the automotive industry. So we've got a lot of tie-ups with companies like Ford and General Motors and Chrysler. Lots of stuff going on there. But we also have other outstanding programs on our campus. Our College of Education has been ranked #1 for 20 years. We've got other great programs that are a little bit newer too. This year, we'll be starting our first video game design major. We've had the minor for 5 years. It's been very popular. And we're excited to see what the major students do with that opportunity. So we're constantly growing and evolving to meet the student needs and interest. And I would encourage you to explore those options that you have on our campus. While we are big, that doesn't mean we're not friendly. There's still so many ways that you can connect with people on our campus. Our faculty are crazy nice in my experience, almost uncomfortably so. I always tell the story. I was working with a faculty member from my James Madison College. James Madison is a residential college where you can study kind of politics and international relations. And while I was in his office, over maybe 2 hours, 4 different students stopped by, not for homework help, but just to say hi and chat with him. And he told me stories about graduates he had from 5 years ago and what they were doing around the world right now. And so people tend to take a lot of pride in their students and really want to get to know them. And I think that's something that I know I really value about the Michigan State community. We're very supportive, even though we're quite large, and you might think that might not be the case. Not true. We're just a really friendly group of people. The experiences you get on campus are just going to be in the classroom. We, like my colleagues here, are also a big research institution as well. And so we're a research level 1 institution too. And many of our students, while they're on our campus, will take advantage of some pretty outstanding research facilities. We've got some big ones that are internationally known. The facility for rare isotope beams is home to a cyclotron, which is kind of crazy. Ours is helped pay for by the US government, which explains why it's here. But that's opportunities for students to discover new elements and work with top faculty members in particle physics from around the world, which is really exciting. We also have students getting involved in research really early. One of the students that joined us last year, she studied in Bangalore. She came to our astrophysics program. And while she was here in her 2nd semester, she joined not 1, but 2 different research groups. And as you guys know, we went remote at some point, much like many of you guys did. While she was remote, she was still able to do all of her research. In April, she sent me pictures of like deep space, and she was taking them from her laptop in her dorm room using a telescope in Chile, which is just insane. And she's been doing that research all summer. She's still here doing some great stuff with her faculty members. And so you can engage in those types of things quite early. And she's not the only student I know doing that. We're also big on student organizations. There are about 900 different student clubs and organizations on my campus. That includes all kinds of things. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, we've got groups available for that. If you're a student who just really likes puppies, we've got an adopted dog club. They're so fluffy. I can't blame the students for loving it. There are groups for students who like to eat chocolate, or for students who are interested in professional development. And so you'll find a little bit of everything. And they're a great way to connect with people while you're here. The connections and networks you build are going to be critical to your success when you leave. But they're also really helping you develop those leadership and collaborative skills that you're going to need to be successful in the workplace. And about 93% of Michigan State graduates have a job or are placed in a graduate program within 6 months of graduation. I would love to say that it's just because we're awesome and we do a great job at what we do. It's not the whole truth, though. It's totally the type of student that comes to our campus. A successful Michigan State University student is someone who wants to try new things and collaborate and challenge themselves. And they're not afraid to fail because they're trying new things and they love that. And that really helps students be successful when they transition off of campus and they join our wide Spartan alumni network that's just under 500,000 strong around the world. Now, I could talk more and more about campus itself, and give me a call sometime, I will. But if we go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about what you would need to do if you wanted to become a Michigan State University Spartan. Like Mark said, November is scary close, and that's our early action deadline, November 1st. November 1st would be for maximum scholarship consideration for Michigan State University. It also just means if you apply early, I'll give you a decision early. No commitment, but you'll find out by the 15th of January at the latest if we're going to be offering you a space on our campus. That's awesome for you guys. And if you apply earlier, you don't have to worry about applying later. I think that's one of the biggest bonuses in my mind. Senior year, kind of busy, especially for those of you prepping for boards and IB exams and A-level exams. We encourage you just to get the application part out of the way so you can focus on those other academic things. In addition to your application, which you can submit to us through the Michigan State University application portal, the Common Application, or the Coalition application, we'll also need academic transcripts from all of our applicants. You'll need to work with your high school counselor to submit those. Please make sure you're talking to them early so they have time to send these to us. If you apply using the Michigan State University application, that'll need to be sent via postal mail. However, with the other two application systems, there's an opportunity for your counselor to send those to us virtually. And this year, I suspect that's going to be super helpful. And so while I don't have a preference for one application over another, you might. And so consider that as you're filling out those applications. Test scores are the other big part that students ask about in terms of the application. Michigan State is test optional for US citizens and permanent residents this year. That means you don't need to submit any test score if you don't want to. However, if you are not a US citizen or permanent resident and you're an international student, we need a test score for admission. I like to say we're test flexible, and I've been saying it for a number of years, so some of you guys may have heard me say it before. And to me, that means we need a test score, but we don't care which one. ACT, SAT, TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo. You pick the one that makes the most sense for you. This year, I'm guessing a lot of people are going to go Duolingo, where you can take that test at home. We're using it primarily for English proficiency purposes. And so once I've kind of checked that box mentally, I move on to paying attention to things like your academics and activities and all those things that are going to make you a wonderful fit for our campus. And so when students ask, are you worried about what happens without having ACT or SAT scores? How will you review my application? I say, I actually haven't been spending tons of time on that anyway. So it's not going to be a huge change for us. Moving to the next slide was perfect. You're reading my mind. I'm going to start wrapping things up, and I want to talk a little bit about scholarships and financial aid, because that's why we're here today. Michigan State University is very fortunate that we do have merit-based scholarships available for international students. Those scholarships can range anywhere from $1,000 one time all the way up to $25,000 per year for 4 years. Additionally, if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident abroad, we do also have merit-based scholarships for you too, don't worry. And that could go up to $15,000 a year. You'll notice the ranges are a little bit different. That's because tuition and fees are a little bit different as well. As a state institution, the tuition amount for Michigan residents, for out-of-state residents, and for international residents, it's a bit different. That's something you might want to look at as you look at different schools in the different places you're applying to. Often students will ask me, how can I get in-state residency in Michigan? Well, if you are a U.S. citizen, your family can move to Michigan. It doesn't happen that often that a family just relocates for in-state tuition. Not that it hasn't happened before, but it's pretty difficult to do actually. And so that's another thing to look into with the schools that you're applying to. If it's a state school and you're interested in that in-state tuition, how can you get it? Pretty tricky here at Michigan State, but that's okay. We do have those merit-based scholarships we're still going to consider you for, and you don't have to do anything extra. We assume you're interested in the money. We do also have work opportunities available on campus, and every year there are thousands of them that go unfilled. We're a big school, there's a lot going on, and so that's going to be something you absolutely have the opportunity to do here at Michigan State University. And finally, need-based scholarships. We do not have any need-based aid for international students. However, if you are a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, you can submit the FAFSA, the Federal Application for Student Aid, to be considered for those need-based scholarships and in the need-based funding that we have on campus. The Office of Financial Aid takes care of that process. We're going to talk more about it today. Who's excited? And I don't want to keep us from the point of our time here anymore. Let's talk more about funding.
Thank you, all three of you. That's a very wonderful presentation. I'm sure the students are understanding the concept that every institution is unique. So it's inevitable or it's essential that the students conduct thorough research in identifying institutions that best fit their requirements. Always remember, one size doesn't fit all. And as we move further, we have compiled a set of questions, oftentimes that we receive from students related to scholarship, funding, financial aid, application forms for financial aid, so on and so forth. So these selected questions will be answered by the panelists as appropriate to them, and you will find answers to your questions as well. A quick note, if the questions posted by you align with the questions that we are going to address in this panel discussion, please take it as your question is already answered. So we will be concentrating more on those questions which are very specific to the universities, and eventually we will try and address them. Thank you for your patience, and now we will open the panel discussion. Okay, so when I show the common questions, I'm sure many of you can relate to this, and I'm sure you have already started posting your questions. So we go with the first question to Amber because she finished the presentation. She is pretty fresh, I guess. Scholarship, financial aid, grants. How you basically differentiate them? Amber, could you just throw some light on that?
Yeah, that's a great question because Sometimes they're different, sometimes they're the same, often they're confusing, right? And so I'm going to start with the idea of financial aid. When we talk about financial aid, really we talk about two different types of aid. They're all money, and that's coming to help you. And so there's like financial aid, but we talk about need-based and merit-based. Need-based is based on your family's financial need for a contribution to your education, whereas merit-based is going to be based on something to do with your academic or personal merit. And so it could be based on your performance in classes or on test scores or something like that. Or it could be based on a really great essay that you wrote for an application for a scholarship that's out there. But it's something to do with you and what you did and your merit for that scholarship. Now, that's financial aid in general. Scholarships and grants are different types of financial aid. Broadly, if you're looking across the board, scholarships are often referring to those merit-based things, the things based on your performance academically or based on that really great essay you wrote for that scholarship that's available. And grants will often be more need-based. Both of those are types of financial aid that you do not have to pay back. So it's the best kind. It's the kind that's given to you. It's kind of like a gift almost, a gift that you might have earned. But it's not a hard and fast rule. And so you will still find some places will have scholarships that include a need-based element in the review. And so some schools will combine merit and need to award scholarships. Or you will find a school that has grants available that are merit-based. Sometimes schools use them interchangeably. And I could say that with authority because we have scholarships that we call grants just to complicate things, perhaps. So you could get the international tuition grant, but it's a merit-based scholarship. And so you have to be a bit careful as you're looking at the wording on the things that you're applying to and being gifted or granted through the university to make sure that you fully understand what you've been given. I'm also going to highly recommend if you ever get a scholarship or a grant, or if you get a loan or something through your university, look at the specific terms that go along with that. Not all things are created equal, and you will notice there are different kind of conditions that go along with things. And so a scholarship might mandate that you maintain a 3.5 GPA. Well, on face value, that sounds great. It's a scholarship, right? But a 3.5 is actually a pretty high GPA. And so that's a lot of pressure on you to make sure you're maintaining that level. Whereas other scholarships might be a little bit more flexible and they'll say a 2.5. And so it's important to look at all those considerations as you're looking at those different types of scholarships and grants, which are slightly different, but almost interchangeable, and financial aid in general.
Thank you, Amber. I'm sure at least now the student would realize that they have to read the fine print to understand each of them in general. Okay, thanks so much. So we move on with the next question. What is CSS, ISFA, and FAFSA? I think, Mark, since you spoke about the three components in your presentation, I guess you would be the right person to answer this.
Sure, happy to help. So you see just a bunch of capital letters there. Don't get lost in the acronyms, but I'm going to make sense of it for you. CSS is the College Scholarship Service. This is run through the College Board. Some schools accept the CSS profile, some do not. I know Drexel University uses the CSS profile for international students to identify need-based aid, which is something we're talking about in terms of financial need, right? As well as the International Student Financial Aid Application. We accept this strictly for students who do not have access to the CSS profile. These would be students in North Korea and Iran, traditionally. And then also the FAFSA, which, as Amber said, the, oh gosh, I always mess this one up. Free application for federal student aid, right? Yes, okay. So, Many institutions will accept one of these. I think most institutions do accept the FAFSA application from U.S. citizens or dual citizens. For Drexel University, we utilize the CSS profile to help paint a picture of your family's financial situation and to use as a tool to award need-based aid. This has nothing to do with your merit. This has nothing to do with your academic performance. This is strictly related to the financial picture of your family. It's very individualized. I will say, not one of these forms is fun. They take a long time. They are very meticulous. You are asked questions about asset to debt ratio, net worth of assets within the home versus liquidity of your family's assets. So be prepared to spend the better part of a day on any one of these applications, and you may be asked some of these questions more than once, depending on which app you're doing, right? So there are some similar questions, of course, between all three of these applications. And these pretty much, these are just tools that we use to help students receive need-based aid. I do see we'll talk a little bit more about this in a couple questions, so I don't want to spoil that. Shanti?
Yep. Thank you, Mark. And yeah, we do have an exclusive session on how to fill or how to address the information, taken from the CSS, ISFA and FAFSA. I definitely recommend all the participants to join us once again on October 1st to get more information about filling these forms, okay? Moving on to the next question. And I think, Lisa, this is what I would like you to answer. What is a need-aware or need-blind institution? And how do they evaluate a student application?
Thanks, Shanti. So need aware and need blind are two terms that can be a little confusing, but once you know what they mean, they're pretty straightforward. So need aware is that when you are applying to an institution, whether or not you need financial aid of some form is taken into consideration when an admission decision is reached. And need blind is when you apply for admission into an institution, the institution does not take into consideration whether or not you need financial aid. Now, these are very different policies, and they're about school budgets and lots of different things that go into why an institution decides to be need aware or need blind. I would say if a school is not saying that they are need blind, you can make the assumption that they are need aware because the majority of schools in the US are need aware. So for Swarthmore, for example, we are need blind for US citizens and permanent residents, but we are need aware for international students. So we have a set amount of budget for our international citizens. And so we need to be need aware to be able to not surpass that budget and potentially take funding away from other parts of the institution. And then for need blind admissions, if you do not need financial aid, or if you need financial aid, it's not taken into consideration when you're applying. So that being said, I would not be scared to still apply to schools, even if they are need aware, because there are different things that schools are looking for, and they could be looking for a student just like you. And whether or not you need financial aid, even though we are considering that, that's not the only thing we are considering.
Can I add something really fast to that?
Yes, Sandra.
Many schools will ask you for financial documents at the time of application. And I think sometimes students assume because we've asked you for a bank statement that we're going to look at it with your admissions decision. And that's just not always true. We need the bank statements to issue the I-20 that you need to get a student visa, right? And so some schools ask for that up front so that they can issue your I-20, your student visa document, quickly once you've been admitted or accepted your offer. Whereas other schools will wait to ask for that a bit later. And so I would say just be cognizant that just because we're asking you for a financial bank document does not mean we'll be considering it in the review process. And I've worked at schools who've done it both ways. We've always been what we also consider need blind, so not necessarily paying attention to the financials, but we might ask for that early just so that we can, again, issue that financial or issue that visa document faster on the back end.
Thank you, Amber, adding your valuable point to that. Yeah, as we move on further, I think I would definitely want Mark to take up this question. How can CSS or ISFA forms help college or university to understand the financial profile of an international student? And in what way does the information provided impact the chances of getting scholarship or financial aid? Because most of the students are worried about this particular aspect of these application forms.
I just received a question in the chat box about this. So I do want to say, depending on the institution, need aware versus need blind, as Lisa has kind of indicated in her answer, that when you fill out the CSS profile, at least at our institution, I would go again on a limb and say a majority of institutions, that filling out the CSS profile has no impact on your ability to get into a university. Neither does filling out the ISFAA or FAFSA. So keep in mind that when I'm reading an application, I am not concerned about necessarily your asset to debt ratio. I am concerned to make sure that you're able to do the work necessary and that you will be successful. Truthfully, we all here are, I heard the word fit, and fit is incredibly important. There are 5,000 degree granting institutions in the United States, and that's because there's well over 5,000 different types of learners. And not Amber, not Lisa, not I, we are not interested in accepting you into a school if you're not able to pay and you're just going to drop out after 1 year because of a financial, a poor fit financially. The CSS profile, the ISFAA, these help us get a picture of your ability as well as the appropriate amount of need. Some schools like Swarthmore are able to meet 100% of the need. Some schools do not meet 100% of the need. So all of this information helps us understand how much money a family may need to make a university education possible, but also, and 2020 is a perfect example of this. Things change. Some students do not fill out the CSS profile when they apply, and then we're thrust into a pandemic where financial situations change. So keep in mind that if you fill this out, we are able to update it and see what happens over the course of your 4 or 5 years of study. And it gives us a broad picture of what need means at a certain point in time. So with people's financial situations changing constantly, by filling out the CSS profile or the ISFAA or FAFSA every year, we're able to make sure that we are assisting you, that your need has not radically changed, and it also paints a pretty good picture for us as to your ability in terms of financial fit. Thank you, Shanti.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. The next question is also to you. Do private institutions require both CSS and FAFSA from a student who is an American citizen currently living outside of the US? How scholarships or grants awarded based on it?
So, so if we're talking about merit scholarships, remember that has nothing to do with your financial need. Merit scholarships has to do with your past performance, and we award merit scholarship based on hopeful future returns, right? We want to reward you for the work you've done in your secondary institution, but also invest in you in the future over the next 4 years. So the merit scholarships, relatively unrelated to CSS and FAFSA. We encourage every student at Drexel as a private institution to fill out both the CSS and the FAFSA if they are a dual citizen or if they are a US citizen. For international students, we only request the CSS profile as you do not qualify for FAFSA. Regardless of where you are living, if you are a US citizen or a dual citizen, fill out both, it will be to your benefit. FAFSA gets updated every year. CSS is a one-time shot at the point of application. Like we had mentioned, scholarships, grants, we don't want to get lost in the weeds with words and definitions. I'm going to try and stay with need-based aid, which is family need. Family need is the driver for our evaluation of CSS profile and FAFSA. Scholarships and grants, that is driven by your merit scholarship, right? So that's merit scholarship is what we use, your academic performance for scholarships and grants. Your need-based aid, we will be using the CSS and the FAFSA.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I think it really makes it very clear for a student the difference between the two terms. Okay, so we move on with a few more questions. Lisa, this is for you. Can you explain how a net price calculator works and how accurate are the net price arrived using it?
So the net price calculator is a helpful tool for some schools to have to help students and their families determine what generally they would have in financial, like need-based aid, and what generally they would be expected to pay. And I say this generally because the net price calculator is an imperfect tool, and it is reliant on a lot of factors that not every family, has. So for example, if your family owns their own business, the net price calculator doesn't really know how to calculate that kind of stuff. And then for people who are living abroad, the net price calculator is not really calculating exchange rates, and it's not really calculating different types of jobs from other countries. So it's really, I would caution against using it as an accurate, like this is exactly what it's going to be as soon as I arrive. It's really there as a tool to help you. But the actual determined need could be very different depending on all of the different paperwork that Mark had talked about. So the net price calculator is not going to ask you all of those invasive questions that the CSS and the ISFA are asking you. And then the financial aid offices at our different schools will be asking these questions, and that will go into determining financial need. So I would use the net price calculator with some caution. Use it as an example and not as like the end all be all for when you're determining, financial feasibility of a school.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I think that's quite a revelation. Sometimes when students try and apply for, let's say, an early decision, and most of the time they use the net price calculator and kind of get convinced, yes, I can go ahead and apply, even if that's binding. So this is a good knowledge, and I think I'm sure people will be always take it with a pinch of salt and make sure that they are overconfident of the pricing that comes out of it. So as we move on, work study awards, how do you compare them between a private and a public college? What is the extent of financial support a student is likely to get from such an award? Would Amber and Lisa, can you jointly give your views on this, or it should be Mark? I mean, you're free to take it up.
I think that we can do this, right, Lisa? We got this. All right, so at a public institution, I would say there are two different types of work study, really. There's work study that is a formal federal program that we use that FAFSA information for, and there's like a set pool of money that students are able to get through that work study program. and they can work on campus, and then the money they earn comes out of that pool. And so that would be a program that's limited to US citizens or permanent residents that had filled out that FAFSA and were given that as a part of their financial aid package. However, that's not the only way to get a job on campus. Like I said earlier, we have thousands literally on my campus, and I suspect that Lisa and Mark have tons of jobs as well. And so if you're an international student, you can still work on our campuses. You just want to do it carefully. And so my advice to students is always, always, always talk to the international office at your campus, wherever you go, about the requirements to get a job on campus. Make sure that you understand the restrictions around it and get their help with getting any paperwork you need, things like a social security number. You're going to need some of those things to start those jobs. However, the majority of the students on my campus end up working at some point, whether it's working at the basketball stadium, taking tickets and sneaking peeks at the game between seating people, or if it's working in a dining hall, cleaning off trays. A little less glamorous, but it pays the bills, right? And so those are both options. Lisa, I'm going to guess it's fairly similar.
Yeah, work study operates the same way, no matter if you're at a private school or a public school. And work study is usually referred to as that federal, the US federal program that supports students. So some institutions like Swarthmore also have work aid that's embedded into your financial aid package. And that is similar to work study, but it is for every student who gets financial aid, not just those who fill out the FAFSA. So if you are work aided, you are expected to find a job somewhere on campus. And for international students working on campus at the institution that you're going to, it's a little bit more simple than finding a job outside, which I think Mark will talk about soon. But if you find a job on campus and you're work aided, your salary will come in the form of financial aid in that way. So you'll work for the financial aid that you're obtaining.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I think Mark will have his exclusive answer on how different is co-op from a work study award and CPT.
Thank you. Sure. So much like MSU, Swarthmore, we have a pool of money that we allocate for students who get the financial need, the work study award. We also, in that pool of money, we set up another funnel for university employment. These are work study jobs that we give to international students, excuse me, not give, that we have students apply for rather, and this is unrelated to co-op or CPT. So there are a couple differences here between work study, internships, co-ops, and CPT. Co-op, of course, is dedicated time instead of studying in a traditional classroom. You are working full-time in the field. Work study is we mentioned a kind of a, it could be a range of jobs, whether that's working in the library or through the athletic center. But really, work study is based under the roof of the institution, within the university. Co-op is external employers, right? And CPT. Now, there's a difference between CPT and OPT. I always try and say C means current. It actually means curricular. So your opportunity as an F1 student to earn money as a part of your curricular training, that is while you are a student. CPT is what makes co-op programs possible. So you're able to earn a full-time salary as a student. You do need to be careful. I believe Amber mentioned in terms of hours of work and maybe caps or ceilings that you should not go through with the U.S. government. We have people working with you constantly to make sure that you're within the confines of the law and that you're not working more than you should or what is legally possible. So we do have a couple safety nets for you as students built into our system to make sure, because If you break the law, we break the law, and nobody wants to get into trouble. So there are strong differences between work study through co-op, but CPT is the driver of co-op. CPT allows co-op to happen through the F1 visa. Curricular practice training, different than OPT, which is optional training to be had after graduation.
Yeah, I think that makes it really clear. And also, as you said, the ceiling is a very, very important aspect that international student must always bear in mind. I think when you're on campus and taking up work study option, it's not more than 20 hours per week. So always keep this in mind. And as all three of them have currently pointed out, reach out to your designated school official who will work with you on these aspects. Moving on to the next question, your presentation did answer this question, whether SAT or ACT scores mandatory to get financial aid. If so, how does it work during this pandemic situation? Maybe a quick answer to this by all three of you would be appreciated.
Well, I could go first because my answer is pretty simple. No, it's not mandatory to get financial aid.
At Michigan State University, we're pretty flexible. If you don't submit it, ACT or SAT, that's fine. We'll still consider you for merit.
Not dissimilar to my colleagues, we are SAT, ACT test optional this year. We do need to make sure that your language is positioned to succeed at a U.S. university. So we do ask you, if you do not take the TOEFL or the IELTS test, there are ways to prove your English language proficiency outside of it. So no, it is not required to receive financial aid. No, it is not required to receive merit scholarships or need-based aid.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's quite reassuring in the pandemic times. And also when the students are really between the exam cancellations and unable to cope up with that pressure of not taking those exams, this will be a very clear message for those students, I hope. Thank you anyway. And this is the final question in the panel discussion today. As we have many other questions that has come to the individual panelists, I would like to really make it short and crisp. Are students automatically considered for admission to the honors program or honors college? And is financial aid or scholarships guaranteed for such admissions? All three of you can give your views on this. Who would like to go first, Mark or Lisa or Amber?
I'll jump in. That's cool. So for us, it's automatic consideration for the honors college and for merit-based scholarships. If you apply, we assume you're interested. However, not all schools will be that way. Some schools, when you're applying for admission, they might have you check a box and write an additional essay if you're interested in their honors college. Or you might have to do something extra at some step. So if you're looking at a school and you think, I'm honors college material and I'm interested in these programs, look into it and see if there's anything extra you need to do. Because while we can give answers for our schools, other schools aren't always exactly the same way. And so you want to make sure you have the right answer for you and the schools that you're applying to. I can say that in terms of scholarships being guaranteed for such admissions, that's also really going to depend. And so for us, generally, if you get into the honors college, you'll get something, but not always. And so it's not a promise by any means.
We would love to consider every student for the honors program. We also realize it's a little overkill maybe. You are automatically considered upon your admissions review. It does not affect your scholarship. It does not affect your financial aid. We do consider students for the honors program. If under that first review, it was not offered to a student upon admission, we do implore students, if they are still interested, to apply independently. because there might be something that we have missed. We certainly also love ambitious students and motivated students who want to take on that the extra academic work. Students are automatically considered, and if they are not admitted, we encourage them to apply outside of this. You must do that after the application to the university is complete. It's just the way we have our flow of order of operations. And of course, if a student is extraordinary, we encourage our international students to apply to the Drexel Global Scholars Program. This is the full tuition scholarship. Most students are in the honors college that are applying for the Drexel Global Scholars. I will say it's my obligation to give everyone these numbers. We have thousands of students apply for a full tuition scholarship, and we have an ability to offer less than 2% of them full tuition scholarships. So I don't want to pump up your tires only to deflate them. It is a very difficult scholarship to obtain. I am happy to answer more questions outside of this, as I oversee the Drexel Global Scholars Admissions Program. So feel free to reach out to me individually outside of this webinar. Lisa?
So the Swarthmore Honors Program is very different than many other schools. So it is actually not something you apply to. It is a choice that you make when you decide your major at the end of your sophomore year. So students decide whether or not they want to be an honors major or a course major. So our honors major is where you do a deep dive into a specific topic. So let's say that you are interested in medieval architecture. So you are going to dive really, really deeply into medieval architecture, maybe during a certain amount of time, like a certain time period. And you are doing intensive study with seminar style classes for the remainder of your 2 years at Swarthmore. Or you decide to do a course major, which is similar to many other schools where you take classes in your major, you do lots of other things, maybe you double major, maybe you double minor, maybe you do a combination of things, but you're getting a breadth of knowledge as opposed to depth. So our honors program is depth, our course major is breadth. And that's really how we look at it. And it is not associated at all with financial aid. And it is, like I said, a choice that you make. An informed choice because you're talking to your faculty members and your advisors to make sure that you're making the right choice. But it is a choice that you make when you decide your major. It is not a merit-based thing. It is not something that you apply to. So like I said during my presentation, Swarthmore tries very, very hard to remove merit markers and remove merit barriers for any of our programming, because we do not think that that is a way to help students succeed.
Thank you all. That was really wonderful addressing the last question in our panel discussion. As I understand that there is quite a lot of questions that has come through our chat box. So I request if all the panelists can stay for 10 more minutes to more than the designated time. And I also request all the participants to stay with us to hear the answers for your questions. So I will quickly complete the presentation with few slides in the background about the forthcoming sessions. So this is the EducationUSA India contact us page. Feel free to reach out to the center that's near to you, and you can download this handout, which is also posted in the chat box. This is our upcoming session on October 1st. As I told you, will be certainly a follow-up for today's session. We will be dealing in detail about the CSS profile, ISPA, and FAFSA. So that session is on October 1st. Moving on, this is our EducationUSA Grad App Camp series, and our next session is on September 26th. September 22nd, which is cracking the graduate SOP conundrum. I don't know whether there are any grad students in this presentation. However, if you know someone, please do share this information with them, and it will be very useful for them too. And adding on our discovery series, This is where you get to know about many of the emerging fields, and as Mark rightly pointed out, you don't know what will be the new kind of occupations people would have after this pandemic. So do tune to this Discovery series and get to know what are the innovative things that you can really do in the future. So we now move on to the Q&A session, and we have also posted the contact email IDs of all three panelists and the Education USA India email ID. Please feel free to reach out to us, and although the panelists, they'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. As I pointed out, there are quite a lot of questions, and now I'm going to take the help of my colleague Aparna Chandrasekharan, who will be collating the questions and putting it out to the panelists. And please stay tuned with us for some more time. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Aparna,
Shanti.
over to you.
Thank you, Shanti. And thank you to the panelists for staying along for another 10 minutes to answer student questions. We really appreciate that. All right, so several of the students have asked very specific questions about what is the fees at X university, at one of your universities, or do you offer full scholarship? For students who asked that question, I'm going to first request all of you to go and spend some time looking at the university's website. And if you're not able to find that information, then please write to Lisa, Amber, or Mark. I would advise you to first do some homework and research, and then please reach out to our representatives who are on the panel here. Secondly, I also see there were some questions on medical and other, sort of specialized kind of programs. As Shanti has just mentioned, our Discovery series is coming up, and we are dedicating one entire session to dentistry, medicine, and other allied health fields. So I would request you to log in for that particular session, and we'll be happy. You'll get a lot more information on that particular day. All right, so now we'll start off with today's section of questions. The first one is, in fact, from a colleague in the Education USA team. He says, is there any opportunity for financial aid for international students who transfer from a community college under the 2+2 program following an associate's degree? If I'd like to start with Amber, and perhaps if the other two colleges also accept the transfer students from community colleges, they could also throw some light on that. Over to you, Amber.
Yeah, that's a great question, because transfer admissions is a little bit different. I think most schools are thrilled to get transfer students coming to their campus, especially from community colleges or other institutions. We're flexible. We want you to be successful, and we hope that you want to do it at our campuses. In terms of scholarship opportunities, it's important to look at those, because a lot of students will choose to go to a community college or a two-year institution in hopes that they're saving money. And depending on if scholarships are available at the institution you're looking at for that next step for transfer students, it may or may not work out that way. And so I can say at Michigan State University, this year we added a couple transfer scholarships. When I say a couple transfer scholarships, I mean $3,000 a year scholarships. That's not that much money when you're looking at a total cost, including housing and everything else, of $60,000 a year. And so you need to think about the numbers and how they kind of balance out. There are other institutions out there that are much more transfer friendly and will have more scholarships available for transfer students. And so definitely check those things in advance prior to even deciding to attend that first institution, so you can really balance kind of what are your goals and what's the overall picture of what your financial commitment might be at various institutions.
Thanks, Amber. Mark, would you like to take that too?
Sure, we do award transfer scholarships. Of course, the work that you've done over your academic career is important to us. We again, not just talking about past performance, but also future returns. We do want to make an investment in your education and your success. I will also say, as you're looking at transfer scholarships, also make sure that your transfer credits, some schools have ceilings on transfer credits, bringing in 60 transferable credits, 90 transferable credits. So make sure you're paying close attention to the details here, because what you might not be getting in scholarship, you might be getting in transferable credits, classes you would not have to take again at the institution. So for most students receiving an associate's degree, majority of those classes would transfer in, assuming that there's something of the ilk within the curriculum. Program by program, it gets a little different. especially if you want to look into something in healthcare. I know nursing is one of these just very weird majors where the nursing faculty do not bring in many transferable credits. So make sure, and each individual institution is different. So make sure that when you're looking at transferring to an institution, you look at the transferable credits and also to ensure that you're going to be earning some transfer scholarship as well. Transfer scholarship has nothing to do with financial need of the family, right? So we're talking about merit scholarship for transfer students, different than need-based aid for a transfer student. Lisa?
So Swarthmore does not offer financial aid for international citizens if they transfer into the institution, because we exhaust all of our financial ability to support first-year applicants. So if we offered scholarships or, sorry, financial aid for transfer students, that means we would have less financial aid available for first-year applicants, and we want to give first-year applicants as much of a possibility to enter Swarthmore as possible. So we do offer financial aid for US citizens or permanent residents who want to transfer in. So that is the difference between those two populations.
Thank you. So we have a question from students who are US citizens and living and studying in India currently. What they want to know is if they were to, if my residency status changes from international student to permanent resident anytime during the 4 years, would my fee structure change and would scholarship become available? I think that would be more from a public university's perspective, perhaps.
Probably a lot of public interest there, definitely. And so typically, if your citizenship status changes and you get that green card, really exciting, your tuition would also adjust as well because you're no longer an international student. You are a permanent resident or US citizen, and so you adjust. And as you adjust, the scholarships you're eligible for adjust as well, because the pools of money at a lot of public institutions are different, and you've moved kind of the pool that you come from. And so that can be really important as a consideration as you're getting ready to make decisions on where you attend the institution, especially if you're getting scholarships and you think that that status might change because it will be different. If it happens prior to starting classes, a lot of times schools will have more flexibility to kind of adjust things and move them around. But once classes have started and you're a student on a campus, that can change a little bit. And so, for example, if you are at Michigan State, pardon me, and we admit you as an international student and you got that $25,000 scholarship, and you start on campus and you do your first year, in your second year, you become a citizen. How exciting. That scholarship wouldn't go with you, and we wouldn't be able to award you non-resident scholarships because you're no longer an incoming freshman student. And so all of a sudden you would not be getting a scholarship. And that can be problematic for a student. However, it also means that if your family was relocating to Michigan, or if you were in the state, you would be eligible for in-state tuition. And so there are a lot of considerations as you're switching residency statuses for the different schools. And definitely, once you get to that stage where you're really looking at specific schools, talk to them, because we're more
Amber?
than happy to talk to you about the process. Mm-hmm.
Amber, in continuation of this question, what if a student is already a US citizen and living in India, completes his her or his 12th grade in India, and then joins as a freshman at Michigan? So I'm assuming the first year they're not eligible for in-state tuition. But if they study for that 1 year in MSU, do they automatically get considered for in-state tuition from the second year? Or is there a residency requirement of 2 years, or how does it work for US citizens?
That one's tricky because it really depends. You would think it would be much more consistent because it's like you're here and you're a citizen, but different schools within even the same state will handle that very differently. So at Michigan State University, it doesn't matter if you live in East Lansing for 2 years even, and you're studying here, if you're a citizen, you're still considered a non-resident of the state of Michigan because you're not paying taxes to the state of Michigan. And so it's really based on kind of family taxes. The only way for us that a student would be able to switch to in-state is if they stopped studying for a full year and just worked, which is not a great life decision for most students.
All right.
Or if your family relocates to the state of Michigan, then we can switch your tuition over that next semester. But like I said earlier, that's not always an option. However, there are plenty of public institutions out there that will switch you to in-state after you've been on campus for a year. And so it's a really important question to ask to those targeted schools that you're really interested in attending, because you'll see a variety in the answers.
Thank you, Amber, for that clarification. Maybe my next question I'll ask Lisa. Many of your universities on this panel and other institutions in the US have announced that they are going either test optional or test flexible this year, right? So if that is the case, what if there is a student who has already taken the SAT or the ACT exam and has done really well? Should they really report the scores? Will it make a difference to them in terms of getting financial aid? Or will you not just consider them at all when you're looking at the application?
So that's a good question. And I hate to be the one who keeps saying it depends, but it depends on the institution, right? So some institutions are going test blind. So that means they will automatically suppress all test scores. Some institutions like Swarthmore and I think Drexel and MSU, we're going test optional. So if you decide to submit your test, we will consider it, but it is a decision that you as a student makes. And I'll speak from Swarthmore's perspective. We are not going to advise any student to submit or not to submit, because that is a choice that you make for your own situation. So if you feel that your SAT score helps you kind of give us a better picture of you as an academic student, great, you can submit it. If you feel that it doesn't, you do not have to submit it, or you can, there's a checkbox that you can say, do not consider standardized test scores. I forget what the exact wording is, but you can check that box and we will suppress those test scores. So I think the test optional policies are different depending on the school, and I would suggest looking at a school's standardized testing policy. So most schools, if not all, will have some sort of policy on their website. And I know sometimes their policies are clear as mud, which, you know, is an opportunity for you to reach out to the school and kind of get some clarification. But if you are curious, some over 500 schools did sign on to the NACAC test optional statement. So I can try to find the link and link it in the chat if you're curious about that. But all of the schools that signed on to that statement are affirming that they are test optional in every way. So that means you will not be penalized in any way if you do not submit a test score.
Great, thank you, Lisa. My next question is to Mark. In India, students do well in 10th grade, and then when they come to 11th grade, the grading is very, very strict, and we end up getting much lower marks than we do in our 10th grade or what we can expect in our 12th grade. How much of that, for example, a student says, I might have something like a 95 or 10 out of 10 in a CBSE program in grade 10. In 11th, I have something like 60 to 70% marks, and then my predicted grades are 95% marks in grade 12. So would that impact, having that low score in grade 11, would that impact my admissions to either any of your universities? So perhaps Mark can take that.
It's a really great question. Thankfully, I have been able to see many transcripts that that show this trend. It is our responsibility as territory, we use the word territory managers, but as counselors for a specific country, to know what is going on in country, to take this information and to apply it to our reading practices. We do a holistic review of reading applications. And I know, for better or for worse, whether it is fair or not, 11th grade in India, in class 11, is unjustifiably difficult. and not necessarily representative of a student's work. Not unlike a 4-hour standardized test, which I personally do not feel is a strong indicator of student performance. I know while reading an application, and I'm going to use the US system here of a 100-point scale, 95 in year 1, 95 in year 2, 65 in year 3, and 95 in year 4, doesn't mean that that student is a bad student. It means something happened. Our job is to put that story together. So while we do read holistically, we certainly take into consideration cultural differences, school education systems, and school education practices within those systems during our review. So I'm not unfamiliar with it, of course, and we know it's there. I will say it does not, for Drexel's holistic review of applications, the class 11 dip, as we have called it internally, the class 11 dip, is taken into consideration and read and reviewed and applied. However, many students reach out every year, and they all have the same concern. So rest assured, someone on this side of the high school diploma knows what's going on, and we certainly do we do read holistically for your benefit as a student.
Thank you, Mark. That was very helpful. This question perhaps is to all three of you. Does online classes in this pandemic situation translate into reduced tuition fee?
So I just speaking from Drexel's point of view, we've done a tuition freeze. So there will be no increase in tuition. In terms of fees, as you have indicated before, there are different costs for different programs. We encourage you to look online to make sure which tuition is responsible, because some coursework use different resources. If you're not able to use those resources on campus, we will not charge you for them. So to invoke Lisa's answer, it depends. It depends on what resources you will be using on any given term. But the institution as a whole, regardless of what major you are studying, has made a decision to freeze tuition in its entirety. I'll stop talking at this point.
Lisa or Amber, would you like to add anything?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
Do you mean this prospective student taking online classes, or do you mean the online semester currently?
I think it's currently, because they're not sure, they haven't indicated whether this is for a fall 2020 student who's currently pursuing an online classes, or whether it is for prospective 2021 fall. They haven't indicated. But let's assume that, should, God forbid, the pandemic shouldn't continue till next fall. But if that does happen, then will there be any reduction in the tuition fees?
Okay, so I will answer both sides of those questions. So yes, it depends on the school. Swarthmore has not done a tuition reduction because we are actually doing a hybrid model where some students are on campus and some students are off campus. But all of the services that are traditionally available to students that can be available virtually are still available. So that is why we have not reduced our fees. And then for students who are currently taking online classes and would like a tuition reduction, I guess, or like transfer credits or something, I would be very cautious about going that path if you are looking at specific schools. So I would say consider whether or not that school would see you as a transfer student then. So we have had instances where students are taking classes either at their home country or they're online or taking online classes and not realize that they're going to get credits for that. And that would mean that they are automatically considered in the transfer pool rather than the first year pool. So I would do a little bit more research if that is what you're planning on doing, or that is what you're doing, about whether or not those credits are going to count. And I would say that even if you don't want them to count, they may still count. So if you are getting a transcript from an institution, you would be considered as a transfer student at Swarthmore.
And then kind of wrapping up the kind of question about where tuition and fees reduced this year at your school, we froze tuition again. And this is actually the 3rd year we've done that, which is awesome. And I like it personally, and students like it too. But we did not reduce tuition and fees. The university and universities across the United States have invested millions of dollars into online infrastructure, which, while you don't see it and touch it physically, is incredibly important for student success learning online. And so that's part of it. I will say students have paid less though, because since they're not on campus, they're not paying for campus housing. They're not paying for student insurance. Some of those fees are waived because you're not here to take advantage of the recreation facility. And so I have seen students have significantly lower bills simply because they're not paying for some of these other pieces that would be a part of the on-campus living experience. But the tuition itself hasn't been reduced for online, no.
All right, thank you so much. I think we'll close with that today. We've already gone 15 minutes past the time, and would be unfair to keep our panelists, with us for longer. We really appreciate your joining us, and thank you so much for patiently answering all our student questions. We request students to make a note of the email IDs for our representatives and for EducationUSA India's email ID. For any further questions or doubts that you have, please do reach out to the representatives directly or write to us at the EducationUSA email ID. Shanti, over to you for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Aparna, for holding the fort for the Q&A session. And thank you all panelists for those wonderful, thoughtful answers for all the questions asked by the students and other participants. At this stage, I also would like to thank my colleagues at EducationUSA Ahmedabad Center for their great support on the technology and helping this happen for us. And I also acknowledge my colleague from EducationUSA Bengaluru Center for supporting me in collating the questions. And of course, the entire EducationUSA India team for this effort to organize a good webinar series that helps students and as well as help us connect with university representatives like three of you. Thanks so much for your presence here, and we would like to have more such session with you in the future. And participants, do join us on 22nd for a graduate session and on October 1st for a follow-up on the financial application forms for undergraduate education. Thank you. Good night. Good luck. Stay safe and take care.